So this has been a busy week, and every meeting slightly different how it's structured. Thanks. So I welcome the folks that are here, and we'll give another minute or so for anyone else to arrive, and then we'll dive into the conversation. Well, why don't we open up? We have an hour and a half. It's a shorter meeting. I want to welcome everyone. It's an exciting space in our time together, bittersweet as it may be, for those of us who love coming together with each other. Just as a reminder, after the last couple of years, Ben Duncan with Kearns West, your facilitator for today, and let's just dive in. We've got a lot to move through. So if you want to go to the next slide. Let's do some introductions. So I'll just go in the alphabetical order on the screen. So welcome, Aaron.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Aaron Orlowski with eWeb.
Thanks, Aaron. Brian.
Good morning, everybody. Brian Adams, Coenergy Propane.
Thank you, Chris.
Good morning, Chris Golightly with the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. Oh, there I am. I'm not sure.
There you are.
My mouse is slow.
All right, good to see you. Elaine.
Good morning, Elaine Prowse with Energy Trust of Oregon.
Thank you, Mary.
Good morning, Mary Morelands with Northwest Natural.
Thank you, Patrick.
Good morning, Patrick Mills with Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla here.
Thank you, Scott Sims.
Yeah, good morning, Scott Sims from the Public Power Council.
Corey.
Good morning, Corey Scott, Pacific Power.
Thank you, Tim.
Tim McMahon with Stoll Reeves. Good to see y'all.
Tim. Tucker.
Tucker Bellman with the Oregon Rural Electric Cooperative Association. Good to see everybody.
And I'll circle back. Charity.
Good morning, everyone. Charity Fain with Community Energy Project.
And Rakesh. You might be unmuted already, Rakesh. I can see you looking for it. No, we can't hear you. Huh. We can't hear you now. Somebody put in the chat that we can't. Rakesh.
How about now?
Oh, we can. There you are. Thank you. Want to introduce yourself?
You want me to introduce myself? Sorry.
Please.
Yes, Rakesh Aneja. I head up our corporate development group at Daimler Truck North America.
Right. Thank you. Shannon.
Hello, Shannon Sousa, Soul Coast Consulting and Design, representing OSEA.
Thank you. Sarah Buckwalter.
Hi, Sarah Buckwalter with Portland General Electric.
Okay. Let's see if did I miss any of our advisory group members? Okay. And for our Oregon Department of Energy folks, I'll have you introduce yourselves as you join and contribute today. If that's all right. So let's keep moving.
All right, I think the next slide is me.
Yep.
You don't mind going to the next slide. Hi everyone, it's great to see you. It's an exciting day, as Ben mentioned. We're really excited to see you all, and and appreciate you bearing with us while we waited an extra beat to publish the energy strategy. I'm going to start with that before I get into the meeting objectives with what took so long, because I imagine you all are wondering. As some of you have noticed, the governor's been busy. The week the energy strategy was due, she was in Asia, and over the past week, there's been some back and forth with the federal government on the National Guard and SNAP. She read the final energy strategy in its entirety and had some suggestions on framing, not on substance, but mainly wanted more time to really internalize the strategy, the recommendations, and to think about how the strategy fits with her broader agenda. The changes she asked for included providing a more comprehensive introduction. So you'll see in the draft that went out for public comment, there was a 2-page legislative summary. That doesn't leave enough space to cover a lot of the details in the report. So you'll now see that there's a longer summary at the upfront. She also suggested framing the actions in a way that leaves the door open to how they're implemented. So we put the thing the action is aiming to achieve first, followed by the how, to put a little bit more emphasis on the thing that the action is going for. But really that time that we kept you all waiting was not spent on edits. It was the time the governor needed with her other obligations to read the final report. So I realize that has not left you all much time to review the final report because of the delay. And as I mentioned in my email, I don't expect anyone to have had time to read it. If you did, that's exciting and it's great. But I'm going to assume that you haven't had time. And this meeting is really structured for us to walk you through some of the main changes and some of the why we made them. And that was always the intent of this meeting, but I think that that's going to be really the focus of most of our time together, to give a little bit of space for you to listen, ask questions, and to go through some of this. And it won't just be me talking. You'll be happy to know you'll hear the team also talk about the sections that they worked on. So as I said in our last meeting, the energy strategy is not the end, it's really the beginning. And I know you asked about next steps. We're going to discuss those today, not in a lot of detail, because the next steps really kind of depend. There are a lot of ways that the energy strategy can be moved forward. It depends on legislative appetite, on agency resources, and also on you and other actors in the space. We'll talk a little bit about next steps, and I also want to make sure that that I have an opportunity at the end, and we have an opportunity to thank you for your time. And I also want to circle back to the questions that I sent each of you individually. I know that one of those questions was impossible to answer because you hadn't seen the energy strategy, and it had to do with kind of your reactions to the energy strategy. So I want to make sure to circle back to that and talk about what we might do with these questions to kind of come back to them. So those are our objectives. I'm going to hand it back to Ben to talk about the agenda. I don't know if there are any questions on the meeting objectives before we move on.
That's good. Yeah, I think we can go to the agenda slide, and I'm just, if we could, just for the record, I think Fred, Jen, Lauren, Jimmy, could you all say hello, introduce yourselves? I think we missed you.
Sure. Can you hear me? This is Jimmy Lindsay, Portland General Electric, Director of Resource Planning. Nice to see everybody.
Thanks, Jimmy. Jen?
Jen Bees, Port of Portland, morning.
Morning. Lauren?
Yeah, hi everyone. Sorry to be late. Lauren Link, State Policy Advisor with the Nature Conservancy. Thanks.
Thanks. Fred, I thought I saw you join. I see your name, Fred, so we'll acknowledge your presence. So in support of the objectives that Edith just laid out, we'll really spend the bulk of this meeting. It'll kind of be a relatively rapid fire discussion around substantive changes from the draft that you had previously seen in the final report that was released this week. So we'll create space for Odo folks to provide some information on those changes and brief space for any questions or follow-up. And then, as Edith promised, kind of close the final parts of our meeting with some wrap up and next steps. So with that as an agenda, let's keep moving. Go next slide.
All right, so we're going to talk about key changes that you'll see in the final report. Yeah, we can go straight to the next slide. So I'm going to start with an overview of the changes to the structure of the report and a bit on content, and then we'll get into some of the specifics with the team who are going to talk about those. So I'll start by saying that we received 753 pages of comments. Not everything required a change in what we said. A lot of comments supported the strategy or specific elements of it. In other cases, there was also disagreement between the comments that we received. And there were a lot of comments that asked for other things like more detail on specific actions or policies, suggesting an additional perspective that they didn't see, or reflecting on what would be useful in the structure of the report. So we've made quite a few changes based on these comments. We focused on areas particularly where we needed to clarify and where we could make the strategy stronger. We, among other things, you'll remember that there's a risks and barriers section within each of the policies. So we've now brought the pathways and the policies together so they kind of sit together. And I think that makes that risks and barriers section more prominent. And that's the area that I know a lot of people were looking to because it recognizes why some of this is tough and where some of the challenges lie. There's also a statement included just before the first actions. It's on page 82, really as a lead into the actions. I'm just going to read it because I think it's important for you all to hear it. Actions do not necessarily represent consensus among the advisory group or working groups, and there may be actions that members of these groups do not agree with. The full summary of policy discussion and written input and comments can be found on the Energy Strategy webpage. So as we mentioned before, we do try to recognize some of the differing views in those kind of risks and barriers sections, but we also have the full 753 pages of comments, and we have a comment summary that's structured to be searchable by kind of the main topics in the energy strategy. So anybody can go in and look at a topic, can look at low carbon fuels and go into that section and see what the balance of comments was that we received on that topic in more detail. And I think somebody can paste the reports. Oh, thanks, Josh. I see that Josh already pasted the link to that if anybody wants to note it. So now I'd like to walk you through some of the main changes of the report. This is a snapshot of the table of contents. Everything that's highlighted gray on this slide and the next two after it are things that are new or where there were changes. So as you can see, there's an executive summary. It's now more complete summary of the document. It's about 8 pages long. This is something we heard a desire for, not just from the governor's office, but in public comments and meetings as well. There's also a standalone summary that's a bit longer, and that includes, for example, the full list of 42 actions. So there's, and that standalone summary is something that we intend to translate as well into a few different languages. The summaries are very similar. The one in the report is shorter to reduce down repetition, but they're both different from the previous summary because we had new material to incorporate, and we'll talk about some of that new material as well. You also may have seen we have a practice at Odo of incorporating, including a tribal land acknowledgement in our reports to recognize the pre-existing and continued sovereignty of the 9 federally recognized tribes, and that also has been added to the final report. So if we go to the next slide, I'm just breezing by that one because there's nothing really new content-wise there. So here's where I get into some of the new content. So the report is now divided into 2 parts. So we restructured it a little bit. We heard some comments around confusion still in the structure and being able to follow. So part 1 is now the introduction and provides all the background on the process, the why of an energy strategy. It has more detailed modeling section, includes the feedback and themes from tribes and the equity and justice framework. And then part 2, which you'll see in a moment, is the energy strategy, and includes the pathways, policies, and actions, which are now all together. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the first highlighted point here, implementing the energy strategy. This is a new section. We heard in our last meeting with you all, inclusive and also in written comments, that it would be helpful to have some prioritization of the 42 actions. This is a message that was really pretty strongly reinforced in a lot of the comments that we received. We also heard a lot of concern over affordability, over electricity system reliability, and about how we advance a strategy at a time where, and really this has happened during the development of the strategy, where the state budget is facing some restrictions. And finally, there were comments about how we plan to take the strategy forward. Everything from a desire for more specificity in the report to more guidance on what comes next. So this section, implementing the Oregon energy strategy, is meant to address these comments. It specifies that after the energy strategy is published, which it was a couple days ago, ODO will work with partner agencies, with the governor's office and other interested parties to plan for how to advance these actions and determine next steps. It highlights that affordability, reliability, and state budget constraints have been topics of increasing urgency. And then it brings up or brings forward some of the 42 actions that can, in the very near term, support affordability, reliability, and that include first steps that can be undertaken with minimal budgetary impact. So essentially the areas that where we can roll up our sleeves and get going now. There might be some budgetary impact down the road, but we could get started today. So for example, and we don't plan to go into this in too much detail today, but we can answer questions. I'll just give an example. So under that reliability kind of heading in implementing the Oregon energy strategy, we have an action that Joni's going to talk about on wildfire liability, which is a new one. And I'd hold questions on that one until after Joni's presented. We have a transmission focused action, recognizing that transmission lines are one of the things that we need to meet reliability. And we also have an action on infrastructure resilience. Under affordability, we have several energy efficiency related actions for buildings. We also have the action there around a revolving loan fund, recognizing the need for no cost and low cost loans to support uptake of technologies. And then under the heading of minimal budgetary impact to initiate an action where we can begin to advance, we have a few actions such as a transportation funding task force, and aligning the state's economic development strategy with the energy strategy. So those are just some examples. We also have a more fleshed out modeling section on modeling and technical analysis. So in the last meeting with you all, we heard questions around the energy mix, around the electricity resource mix, around land use. And so we added more details on the modeling that address those areas to help kind of establish a better understanding of the key modeling takeaways that we have with links to more complete details in the technical slide report and data sets that are now available online. And maybe, I don't know if it's necessary to drop the links into the chat, but Josh, if they're on hand, we can always drop them in. And then we have a section called cost of inaction. We received a lot of comments around cost, and they really ranged. Different people meant different things when they said cost. There were concerns over how much is this going to cost, this being any number of the actions or ideas that are in there, to concerns over how much climate impacts are already costing us. And so we included this section that talks about, it gives a bit of context around that topic of cost, includes some of the climate related costs that we're seeing, also talks about the costs and benefits of some of the areas like electrification, for example. So that's a section that I would draw your attention to that I think will be interesting and that really works to include a more robust description of the context that we're operating in presenting the energy strategy. All right. Any questions on this slide before I go to the next one?
Not seeing any.
Okay. I'm also recognizing that it's very difficult to react if you haven't read this, and I'm giving you like the high level overview. We're very happy to provide more details, have a conversation, set up a meeting at any point once you've started to go through these. So I just want to put that out there. That always stands with us at ODO, but I think it's important to emphasize here when we're all together as well. Okay, if we go to the next slide. So again, this is just the table of contents and I'm highlighting the pieces that jump out. Hopefully that's also helpful for you since you're familiarizing yourself with the structure of the report. So part 2 presents the energy strategy, and the draft pathways were followed by a lot of context before getting into the policies and actions. And one piece of feedback we received was confusion over that structure. So we brought everything together now, the pathways, policies, and actions, into one section. We've also changed the order of the pathways so that clean electricity comes second after energy efficiency and before electrification. We've emphasized that all 5 pathways are important and all 5 need to happen at the same time. And that's the main message. But that said, there was so much concern over reliability, and we've been following these discussions in our day-to-day work outside of the energy strategy as well. There's so much concern over reliability and whether we can build the electricity that we need, particularly in the very near term, that we thought it helpful to put clean electricity first for emphasis. I'd like to spend most of our time diving into the specific action areas and that I'd like that the team will be covering. So I think with that, I'm gonna just mention how we'd like to run this. Mary and Lauren are going to go next, and they're going to start. They're going to dive into equity and justice and the energy strategy, and then we're kind of move through other topics in the energy strategy. We're going to be going from topic to topic. So if you have a question, just raise your hand as it comes up. And we'd like this to be more conversational than us doing a block of presenting and you listening and then coming up with questions. So just raise your hand as questions come up and we'll pause to answer them and then we'll move on. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to, I think, Lauren, because I saw you just come off mute.
Thanks, Edith. Like Edith said, I worked with Mary during the review process. I focused on the environmental justice and equity, and Mary addressed the affordability. I'm going to do the report out for both of us, but we're both here in case anyone has questions. Most of the comments we received relating to the equity and justice framework were that there was a need to better embed the work into the body of the strategy. And we did this by specifying communities who may be burdened or benefit from a policy and adding language that more explicitly connects the framework approaches to policies in the narratives. One example is the addition of energy burden to 2A, which now states facilitate energy infrastructure enhancement and expansion while avoiding, minimizing, and mitigating negative impacts on energy burden, natural and working lands, tribal cultural resources, and communities. Similarly, comments reflected the need to more holistically address affordability throughout the strategy. And we did this by adding a new section called the cost of inaction, which discussed more directly affordability challenges and how they relate to Oregon's energy goals. We also reviewed each of the pathway and policy narratives to ensure that important affordability considerations were addressed, looking particularly at the clean electricity narratives. In places where more specific affordability concerns were raised by commenters, those were addressed in their respective sections. If there's any questions, happy to address them. And if not, I'm going to pass it over to Michael.
Excellent.
All right, thank you, Lauren. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to highlight changes to the cross-cutting actions, which are the actions, just as a reminder, to advance progress in multiple sectors. So it impacts multiple areas within the strategy. So in our draft report, we had these legislative and policy actions at the end of the policy action section. We received guidance on the kind of the critical nature of these cross-cutting actions, that they provide the overarching kind of policy direction and impact for multiple sectors. And so we actually elected to move it to the beginning of the policy action section and lead with that. We also received a lot of feedback around needing to connect the energy strategy with the potential for economic opportunities and growth within Oregon. And so we talked to Business Oregon and other partners about this. And one of the ways we addressed it was by creating a new action focused on aligning the energy strategy with the Oregon Economic Development Strategy that Business Oregon is developing now and should be out in the first quarter of next year. So we're planning to make connections to the energy strategy in the economic development strategy, work with Business Oregon on that, and even more importantly, how these strategies will be implemented. So for an example of this kind of collaboration would be how we engage the industrial sector in helping them decarbonize, plan for the future, and incorporate new technologies. We would like to do this with Business Oregon as we identify industrial modernization opportunities, helping existing businesses remain competitive and attract new business to Oregon. So I will pause here and see if there are any questions about these changes. Okay.
Not seeing any. Yep.
Okay. Hearing none, so I'll hand it back to Edith.
Oh, shit. Oh, that's a clap, Shannon. Sorry. All right. Well, you got a clap.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, if we can go to the next slide. So I'm going to cover the transportation actions here. Jillian couldn't be here today, but I want to give her the credit for the work that went into this. Overall, transportation comments were generally positive. Some of the things we heard that are reflected in the final strategy are included here. There was there were some comments asking for more emphasis on medium heavy duty vehicle electrification because the sector has an outsized impact on air quality, on climate emissions, and on public health. That was a pretty strong message. It is also more complicated and expensive to electrify in this sector. And so we put emphasis on the need for public support to support this happening. So there's additional language in the vision for the transportation actions to making these points. There's also a fair amount of comment asking for more prioritization in general, but among the transportation actions specifically. So you'll see some items in the section reordered to introduce that prioritization. The most significant change was combining 3 actions into one. We have an action calling for a climate-aligned transportation funding task force. We rolled 2 of our funding actions into this one, the funding for zero-emission vehicles and funding for zero-emission vehicle infrastructure. So it's just a bigger action that bundles together related things. And it's now within the explicit scope of the task force to identify new revenue sources for these things in addition to other studies. So I'll pause here for any questions. Also recognizing if I don't know the answer, I might have Jillian get back to you.
I'm not seeing any questions.
Okay, so I'm going to pass it over to Rob in that case.
All righty, thank you, Edith. And just confirming that you all can hear me.
Gotcha.
All right. I had some WebEx issues this morning. And for those who don't know me, I'm Rob Delmar, and I'm a senior policy analyst at Odo. And in this Oregon Energy Strategy, I was the staff lead for the Buildings and Distributed Energy Resources Policy Working Group. We received a lot of comments in the buildings section that had overlap with other sections. And so some of what you'll hear on this are closely related to, especially what you heard from Lauren already. We received many comments relating to environmental justice, equity, and affordability issues. And similar to what you saw in transportation, we addressed these by reordering our policy actions to recognize a higher priority, kind of prioritize and highlight those measures that were already in place in the report, but just people had a hard time finding them. So we reordered the policy actions to get the environmental justice and disadvantaged community measures up front. Also relating to affordability, we provided a little more direct content relating to consumer costs associated with some electrification measures and specifically around heat pumps. And finally, for distributed renewables and especially rooftop solar, we heard that we need to better recognize some of the policy barriers associated with rooftop solar. And so we added content relating to net metering policy, permitting, and other soft costs that are some of the barriers in that sector. And I will pause there to see if there are any questions.
Not seeing any.
Okay, so I will pass it on to Joni. Thank you.
Hey, Ben. Sorry, Joni, let me interrupt for just a second. I apologize. There is a question in the chat, and I just wanted to share it. Rebecca is asking if the requested approach right now for everyone in the group is to provide questions or comments on specific sections. Are we only looking for questions right now or also comments? So I think we're looking for if there's any questions primarily. But if there's comments that people want to make, absolutely. And if you can throw them into the chat and or raise your hand, then we can keep track of those things.
Yeah, that's great, Jessica. And I think just based on our kind of calculation of time, because there hasn't been a bunch of questions on each of the sections, we can open it up at the end too, just for maybe overall comments and reflections that folks might have based on what they've just heard.
Great.
Thanks for the question. Yep.
Thanks. Again, this is Joni Sliger. Good morning. Can I get a thumbs up? You all can hear me okay?
Gotcha.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ben. So before diving into kind of the near-term actions for the electricity sector, I want to address some changes in the pathways and policies. We got a lot of comments on electricity, on the system, its importance, the challenges it faces today, and its potential future. We got more comments on this than other sections. So I've got a couple of slides, and you'll see a fair number of changes throughout the section. One of the themes that we heard was concerns about the importance of maintaining system reliability through the energy transition, and particularly in the face of rapid near-term load growth. So Edith already mentioned this, but one of the changes was made to the list of pathways. So clean electricity is now listed as the second pathway. While the strategy calls for progress on all pathways, and this list doesn't reflect prioritization per se, we did hear concerns that the draft report kind of read like it was calling for electrification in advance of grid readiness, and that wasn't the intent. So I hope that structural change mitigates that concern. Another change was revising the pathway language. You may recall the prior text in the draft was invest in clean electricity infrastructure to maintain reliability and promote load flexibility to reduce system costs. Now it is secure, reliable, affordable, and clean electricity by expanding the electricity system and incorporating load flexibility. So this really emphasizes reliability and affordability, and it's more inclusive of non-investment solutions, although we definitely need to make more investments as well, as the report still says. We also had a number of other changes here, some big, some small. For example, there's a definition for clean electricity. You can find that in the appendix. Maybe one of the bigger changes was some of the additional content. The explanation for this pathway is longer than it was before. So the draft had started with recognizing the electricity sector statewide as a significant source of greenhouse gas emissions today, and emphasized kind of the expected growth over time through electrification. And the final report starts with acknowledging the historic role of hydropower and then recognizing how fossil fuel plants have been added to the state's mix over time. And then looking out to 2050, the report describes modeling results for the electricity sector, looking less at that electrification, which is described elsewhere, and instead elevating that long-term shift in Oregon's energy resource mix. The least cost economy-wide path that was modeled reduced, but it didn't eliminate Oregon's reliance on natural gas or on unspecified power. And they continue to provide some reliability benefits in 2050. A third change here was there's more discussion on the importance of market regionalization and how the model results kind of affirm this as a valuable direction to pursue. I think the most of the text there should hopefully not feel too new. It was previously addressed under the policies, but now it's in the pathway as well to kind of elevate that point. All right, next slide, please. All right. So we also have some changes in the vision section for the electricity sector actions. Again, we heard in comments a desire for more recognition of how important hydropower is to Oregon and the region. And the vision section is another place that kind of briefly but explicitly acknowledges hydropower's continuing role in the electricity sector. This section also has a bit more emphasis on reliability in the face of rapid near-term load growth. As I said, that was a major theme in comments we heard, and this is one of the places where we worked to improve the narrative on that. So I've got 2 more slides because I want to talk about 2 specific actions, but I know I just threw a lot at you, so I want to pause if there's any questions on kind of that framing. I know this isn't a fully comprehensive of every change, but I hope it gives you a sense of what to expect when you get to page 57. All right.
Not seeing any. Yep. Keep going.
Great. All right. So big picture, we added a new action regarding wildfire, and we modified the policy action on transmission, as Edith already said. Let's move to the next slide. Great. So we added an action regarding wildfire utility liability. Here's the kind of text, the high level, and then there's 2 pages in the report that explain this. But to sum up very briefly, wildfires are worse than they used to be, and increasing risks translate to increased costs for utilities, both investor-owned and consumer-owned, and their customers. Other states have taken more action on this than Oregon has. So this action proposes an expert review be commissioned to kind of review potential solutions and inform the discussion. To give some background, this is a barrier we heard in working groups. It's a barrier we heard in comments. Wildfires are identified as a risk in the policies, and now there's this action to address and make progress on the issue. All right, next slide, please. And then this is my last slide, I promise. So we made pretty big changes to the policy action we had regarding transmission. You may recall the prior language called for establishing a state transmission entity in conjunction with some siting changes to help the state drive more build out of transmission. That build out is critical. We heard both support for that action, but also concerns with the approach. So we've kept state action on transmission as a priority in the report, but we've modified the approach. And it starts with emphasizing kind of near-term opportunities for the state under existing authority that can help inform and move forward-looking progress, which might include the state establishing a state transmission entity. But its first step now is for Odo to lead a review and a sharing of key findings from the work that's already underway at utility planning, work streams from the Bonneville Power Administration, at West Tech, and then to expect some near-term action both on siting of transmission and on facilitating investment. So under that, you'll see a paragraph each on those items. And then the action concludes with how those near to medium-term actions could help inform state discussions. All right, I think those are the main things I wanted to cover. Any questions?
Thanks, Johnny.
Thanks, Ben. If not, I think I hand back to Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Joni. Okay, so I've returned. So I'm going to walk through what we heard, considered, and improved upon in the industrial actions and the low carbon fuel actions. So public comments and guidance were in support of the draft industrial actions overall. There were requests to include clarity. Edith mentioned it earlier around how these actions would work, and requests kind of provide some examples of industrial decarbonization and how we might be able to implement something like this. So for example, the role of energy efficiency, electrification of industrial equipment, or industrial symbiosis within existing or future industrial parks around the state. We added greater detail and examples within the pathway and policy descriptions. But as far as the industrial actions, Industrial Action 1 was previously focused on identifying solutions for large industries designated by the Climate Protection Program as emissions intensive and trade exposed entities. So this was not intended to be part of the Climate Protection Program itself or limited by that program. We also don't want to cause any confusion or potential conflicting signals with how DEQ is communicating what they're doing through the CPP. So we elected to support Oregon industry more broadly by researching solutions and working with all of Oregon's industrial sector. So if you go to the next slide, please. You can see kind of the changes we made within the language here. So we've got the draft and then the final version we landed. And you can see how instead of targeting the specific group of large industries in Oregon, that are complying through the CPP. We're expanding this and looking at all large industrial entities within Oregon and really looking to research solutions and work directly hand in hand with like Business Oregon and other state entities to kind of work with Oregon industries to see how we can help them decarbonize and modernize while remaining competitive within the state. So hopefully this change offers us greater flexibility in how this could be implemented. So let me pause here and see if there are any questions about this change.
Not seeing any.
All right, great. So let's go to the next slide. Let's talk about low carbon fuel actions. So public comments and guidance on the future of fuels varied quite a bit, as you can imagine. So there was certainly concern around kind of a focus on low carbon fuels and worry that that diminishes the opportunity of electrification and other opportunities. We did also hear requests that we include more natural resource and community trade-off language when we were discussing the need for more energy infrastructure expansion, in particular potentially citing of fuel production sites within the state. And we're also asked to clarify even greater kind of the lack of low carbon fuel resources available today and supplied to the state. And we also requested, we heard a lot about providing information on kind of the foundational role of fuels and resource adequacy and resilience planning within the state. And so we address all of these concerns with greater explanation and greater detail and examples within the pathways and policy narratives section. But as far as the fuel actions themselves, we kind of revised both of those. And so Fuel Action 1, if you remember, was focused on creating low carbon fuel production opportunities within Oregon. And Fuel Action 2 was focused on development of a low carbon fuel roadmap in Oregon. So if we go to the next slide, we can take a look at some of the language changes. So for Fuel Action 1, we received the kind of guidance that the emphasis should be on expanding low carbon fuel supply generally, and not specifically be limited by what could be developed within the state. We're certainly still going to look at potential opportunities for fuel production within the state, but expanding that supply. So we want to broaden the scope of the action to increase low carbon fuel supply in Oregon by supporting national and regional supply development, as well as evaluating that in-state development. So create a balance of how can we get the supply here and what's the best way to do that. So an example would be if we're working with partners like the Port of Portland to kind of increase access to sustainable aviation fuel or other fuels. Okay, so that's Fuel Action 1. So let's jump over to Fuel Action 2. Next slide, please. So what we heard generally about Fuel Action 2 was there was concern that this was kind of unnecessary or would duplicate work already being done by DEQ through the Clean Fuels Program or the Climate Protection Program or other policies kind of around fuels within the state. And so we revised the description to clarify the intent and potential value to the state as well as businesses within Oregon. We tried to reframe this more as a low carbon fuel development kind of deployment roadmap, demonstrating the best application of these fuels, also clarifying the value of what will be delivered, what may be available, and how it will help Oregon businesses. And we also kind of want to balance that by including some language around kind of how we would demonstrate that the emissions reductions would be real, environmental benefits would be real for these low carbon fuels. Because we certainly heard concern around that and got some guidance that we wanted to make sure that was a critical piece to adding low carbon fuels within the Oregon market. So let me pause there and see if you have any questions about kind of those changes to the actions or what we heard about low carbon fuels in general.
No questions.
Okay. All right, so hearing none, Edith, I'll turn it right back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So I think
sorry, I had a question.
Oh, please.
Thank you so much. Rebecca Smith, Renewable Hydrogen Alliance. So my question about this revised action is, one, is there any sort of follow-on potential legislative ask associated with this, and in turn a fiscal? And if not a fiscal, what kind of analysis were you expecting to be done without any money for maybe some more of the modeling or intense math? And then second, do you have any sort of sense of what kind of timeline you would be looking for this study? You know, I could certainly see the value in this and what it could produce, but there's always the concern of timeline as well. And you know, does this mean that we're not going to see any legislative action because they're waiting for this report or this roadmap? And then how long are you expecting it to take? Thank you.
Wow, Rebecca, that's a great question. I think that kind of leads into our implementation phase and what we're trying to figure out the next steps in this. We do not, within the energy strategy itself, right? We have not created these as legislative concepts with fiscals, but you're right, that would be kind of the next step, and we start having conversations with other state agencies as well as legislature or the governor's office, and try to start talking about what this could look like and how to build out. Certainly, we wouldn't want this this policy idea to be a barrier to legislation, as you're pointing out. Hopefully, it wouldn't slow things, but we would hope we want to be able to get resources or information available that could lead to some policy development. But Edith, do you have anything you want to add to that as far as kind of when we're looking at the next stages or implementation and talking more about the energy strategy and how it could lead to policy concepts, kind of what our process is going to be? Or is that, I guess, is that next steps?
No, I think we should just jump into it here. Thanks. Rebecca, I think your questions are really good. We kind of following what Michael is saying. This is a strategy. The actions are not fully formed legislative concepts. That's something that we would leave to those who are going to bring forward legislative concepts, and we're here to support. We're looking forward to some of these ideas being taken up. Ruchi can correct me if I'm wrong, but Odo, in the short session, we're not, I'm just gonna leave it to Ruchi. Maybe Ruchi, you can comment briefly on just, because I think part of Rebecca's question was about Odo bringing legislative actions forward ourselves. And I hesitate to answer. You'll be able to answer better than I can.
Yeah, I think it's good questions too. Right now, we are not seeking any legislative concepts or changes in the short session, but we do have a process that we'll work through with our Energy Advisory Work Group, as well as through the DAS and Governor's Office process on draft legislative concepts and POPs. And so our typical process is to bring forward ideas to our Energy Advisory Work Group. That's a statutory role that they play in helping us understand sort of the universe of concepts. And I think that the energy strategy will be a major part of how we shape that conversation. But at the end of the day, like all other agencies, we need to work through our process with DAS and the governor's office, and the constraints that you're naming around revenue are going to be a major part of that conversation. So I'll just say that, there's we're hoping for this group to help us with that prioritization and that implementation. And also, if there are opportunities that you find in terms of either technical assistance support, like partnerships with national labs, other grant opportunities, we want to hear those as well.
Thanks, Ruchi. I feel like there's a nice transition here to Lauren's question. Lauren, I'm just going to read out your question regarding the 2 new updated policy actions for the clean electricity pathway. Are these actions that Odo can implement with existing authority, staff capacity, and resources? Are we able to start implementation of these action items, or will we need direction from the legislature? So those 2 actions are the wildfire liability action that has both Odo and the PUC working together, and the other is the wildfire action, which also is likely to involve other agencies, but would certainly have a role for Odo. I think that we have put these as priorities. So we're in the process of reviewing our resources and ability to take them forward, and to what extent, because there's like there's taking things forward. There are different levels of how in depth we could be and how many resources that would take. We did map out all the actions that implicate Odo in the energy strategy, and we certainly couldn't do them all at once, which was part of the reason for the prioritization. But these are like top line agenda items for us. I don't know, Ruchi, if you want to add to that, but that's, I realize that's not a full answer, but hopefully that's enough to give you a sense of where we are at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's right. I would also say that if this group has, in my mind, I think of it as like a partnership alignment question too. If you are looking at these actions and seeing overlap with what your priorities are and what you will be working on, that's helpful for us to know in terms of where Odo's greatest value add would be.
Does that answer the questions, Lauren? Yeah. And Rebecca, is that just a comment, legislative concepts for a short session?
I mean, it felt like a question.
Okay. I didn't see the question mark, the punctuation. So for our bureaucrats, you want to confirm?
I can confirm that Odo does not have any legislative concepts for the short session.
Thanks,
We'll be in our role of providing sort of information and technical assistance upon request.
Good. Well, maybe Rebecca, Shannon, jump in.
There I go. Yeah, I just wanted to comment and encourage this. I'm just back here applauding. Great work. This is really difficult lift. And regarding the very real resource limitations we have, there are so many concurrent conversations going on the planning and the policy and roadmap development sides that are in direct alignment with some of these policy actions. And I know that you, Odo staff, are aware of that, like California's work in the wildfire implications and study along the utility seam, as well as the road mapping that's been going on for clean fuels to the north of us in Washington. So the timing is perfect for this. And I think that in addition to our national labs, that closer coordination and integrating that in with our neighboring states and agencies is critical. So do you have the capacity with your existing internal program to strengthen those communication pathways with our neighbors? Or is that something that you can continue to maintain momentum to help identify those actions that we can leverage a lot of efficiency from our neighbors through? Does that make sense?
It does. I can start, but I'm happy for others to jump in. I think that, as you point out, cooperation with neighboring states is it's always been important. I think it's going to be increasingly important. And so we are looking at those opportunities. So that's kind of the quick answer, right? That yes, and the energy strategy highlights areas where some of those, where we might deepen some of those discussions.
May I ask one more question?
Keep going, Sean.
What is the communication strategy with legislators and agencies for this important and timely report? And I'm wondering specifically about the economic development aspects, like which committees or anything that you can share there, resource, wildfire committees as well, or just energy and environment?
Just looking at the calendar, because next week we have 2 presentations to 2 legislative committees. On Monday, it's does somebody want to jump in?
Keep going.
On Monday, it's the House Climate, Energy, and Environment Committee, and then Tuesday we're presenting to the Senate Energy and Environment Committee. So those are kind of immediately coming up. I don't know, Ruchi, you might have others on your radar that aren't on mine that are more, I think there's some topic specific presentations that we're doing as well. The ones I've mentioned are like broad energy strategy presentations. So we have received questions and requests to present, and we're getting ready to do that during Ledge Days. Ruchi, do you want to add what
I'll just add that we're really open to doing presentations, like I think even to commissions, or, I think there's something that Jillian's working on, right, with a presentation, not for the legislature. We just recognize that these are actions that may span like local policymakers, tribal policymakers, agencies. And so I think that's another ask for this group in connecting us with those opportunities. And then for legislatively specific opportunities, our colleague Christy Split is coordinating that. And so if you find an opportunity to like brief a legislator because of your conversation, looping her in, we would really welcome that. She's doing that work, and we would love to do that in partnership with you all. We want this to be a resource for you, but also in terms of helping to answer questions that legislators have. And if that involves a committee presentation, we're really open to new committees as well.
Wonderful. Thanks.
And there's another one that jumps out just to give a sense of like the range. I know Michael is presenting to the Association of Oregon Counties, I believe, next week as well. So yeah, so we're really open and we're already working to respond to some requests.
Sean, is that your old hand? Yes. Okay. Rebecca, you may have already brought up, but we were going to open it up if there's other questions, but also just maybe comments on what we just walked through. And I know, Rebecca, you were maybe holding a comment.
Yes, and thank you. So again, for everyone, Rebecca Smith, Renewable Hydrogen Alliance. You know, certainly we would like to see more on the low carbon fuels side in terms of the strategies. We agree with the comment that you received that there needs to be expanded solutions. You know, I think overall, I know that you really tried to make a lot of the modeling inclusive of looking at the energy system as a whole. But I think that some of these strategies still suffer a little bit from a disconnectedness there. You know, and so like, for example, you got a comment about a concern that a focus on low carbon fuels potentially reduces the focus on electrification, whereas our concern really is that with that projected 9 gigawatt shortfall of renewable electrons, that absolutely affects all of the sectors that we're, you know, looking to electrify, and that includes transportation. And so we see these low carbon transportation fuels as playing that really critical role in terms of helping ease the demand for those renewable electrons, because we're not going to have more or even possibly enough. And so we would certainly like to see that concomitant emphasis with the low carbon fuels and the roles that they can play as a complement with electrification in zero emission fuels. Also, you know, this is a previous comment that we had made, but we really see that the focus on heavy duty for a hydrogen regulatory framework for fueling infrastructure to be counterproductive. You know, most of those standards are really going to need to span, you know, all hydrogen fueling infrastructure, not just heavy duty. Certainly there are specific standards to a specific, you know, rate of dispensing for a heavy duty dispenser versus a medium or even light duty. But, you know, that just seems to be, you know, counterproductive and counterintuitive. And additionally, you know, we would hope that for this roadmap strategy, that it would be, you know, less maybe prescriptive where that wasn't necessarily supported by the data. And, you know, when we talk about this focus on heavy duty for hydrogen as opposed to electrification for light duty and even medium duty, again, with that shortfall of renewable electrons, but then also the rural urban divide. And we see that the vehicle miles traveled for rural folks to be a lot higher, and maybe the cost and ability to get charging infrastructure installed can be challenging. You know, Douglas County PUD has the first hydrogen fueling station available now in Washington State, and the city there immediately added a hydrogen fuel cell patrol car for the police because they needed a vehicle that had a high uptime, short refueling, and honestly the cost of fuel made sense for them. And so we just don't want to see this picking of winners and losers when we really see hydrogen and these other low carbon fuels as absolute complements to electrification and not a combatant. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Rebecca. I'll just add that a lot of the points that you're making, I mean, we talk about zero emission vehicles, not just electric vehicles, hydrogen fuel cell electric are in there. And I think a lot of the details that you're talking about, things like urban rural divide, we've worked to, in fact, strengthen some of the narrative around that in response to comments as well. And then some of these other details are ones that we really welcome to, you know, dig into when we get into the discussions on the roadmap, for example. So appreciate your comments.
And I just want to say I really appreciate that inclusion of the zero emission vehicles. And I wanted to add, that RHA has been doing a lot of convening around this need for a regulatory framework for hydrogen fueling infrastructure, bringing together Washington, Oregon, with California to learn what they've put into place versus what might work for states that aren't the 5th largest economy in the world. And it's, it's challenging, and we would certainly love to see, more, more work with the agencies. I know that you all have many demands on your time, and we really are trying to move that forward, but would just love some partnership there.
Thanks, Rebecca. Other questions, comments? Yeah, Mary?
So mine is a little bit more process. I do want to start by saying I appreciate that there have been, thoughtful updates and refinements to the narrative given input. So that doesn't always happen in a recognizable way. And I just want to say I appreciate that, because adequacy is a friend of mine for so many of us who work in the energy system. So thank you to that. But just knowing that to make those updates and to work with the governor's office, I understand, we saw this a little bit later than would be ideal to give really meaningful feedback today, Monday afternoon. So in an effort to be a good partner and also to provide feedback as we see appropriate in the way most useful, what is the timeline, if any, that you would like, seeing as this is, kind of done and dusted, but also framing feels important. So I just want to make sure that providing feedback beyond just it being satisfying to talk about things we've all spent more than a year on, what is the sort of value and desire from Odo?
Thanks, Mary. I think I'm going to answer probably part of your question, and then maybe I want to clarify what you mean by feedback. But one of the things that I was going to get to at the end of the meeting, but it's just happening organically, which is so much better than putting up slides with points. So I think I kind of feel like we're covering the slides without having to bring them back up necessarily. So we would really like feedback on the questions that we shared with you all, but know that there wasn't enough time for you to respond to them. And we didn't want to reschedule this meeting. We thought it was a good opportunity to at least help inform your read of the energy strategy by highlighting where some of the changes are and how we came about making those changes. So I was going to suggest that by the end of the month, we would love to, either through a conversation or it can be just a response to the email, to hear more on your reflections on the energy strategy itself and also on the process. The energy strategy is supposed to be renewed over time. So part of this is what you would expect, which is, what worked, what didn't, where can we improve? But I think that sooner than those 4 years, I think that we at Odo are always trying to improve how we engage, and we're going to continue to engage on these different topics. And so I would really encourage you all to have the mindset, not just of like, how was the energy strategy process to inform the energy strategy in this configuration of 29 advisory group members, but rather, as Odo moves forward in supporting kind of further dialogue on how we take the actions forward and how we take the energy strategy forward, what can we do better, or what works that we should continue. Does that answer your question, Mary?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
And Edith, did you want to ask the follow-up question, or did you already kind of say what you said in terms of what Mary meant by feedback? Because that was the question.
Mary said I answered the question, so I think I did.
Okay.
I just wasn't. I was guessing, Mary. So
you guessed well.
Okay.
And really, when feedback, my apologies, to clarify, receiving the email, I've been waiting to get the draft to respond. I want to make sure that response would still actually be useful, is really kind of what I was getting at. Don't want to just write for the sake of writing and catharsis, but want to make sure that we're being helpful. That was all.
Thank you. And I really appreciate that. And we do, like I said, it can be in writing, it can be a conversation. I think that we're now moving into a much more focused part of the work on implementing the energy strategy. mean, we've been focused, but we've been focused on something that sets up a big picture and pathways and specific actions. But there's still a lot of detail to be hashed out and still a lot of conversations to be had before many of these actions become reality. In some cases, maybe we could start taking some of them forward. But you know, we are really open to in those conversations. It can also be here. If somebody wants to speak up, but really open to how we continue to work with each of you and moving forward on the items in the energy strategy.
Not seeing any other hands raised for comments or questions. I don't know, Edith, if you've kind of already moved into some of the next steps, or if you want to kind of move formally into that part of the agenda.
Yeah, I think we have, and I'm realizing there's a slide. Maybe we can put the slides back up.
Yeah, so, you know, you created the slide. Let's use it.
I mean, you all know agencies love slides. It's like our favorite thing in the world. Aside from coffee. Okay, so if we go to the next, I think the next slide we've pretty much covered after this one. It's really, I was just wanting to highlight some of what's in the next step section, but you know, I mean, these are things that you know, but it's nice as perhaps as a refresher, just, you know, some actions maybe within agency authority and resources. In some cases, we may need additional resources, and obviously that's a difficult thing right now. And in some cases, we're talking about a new program, policy, or authority. So that's something that would certainly require more work and legislative action. We have those near-term priority actions in the next step section. I just want to emphasize that the other actions are also very important. We see all 42 as being really important. We also recognize we can't do all of them at once. And so that was our mindset in thinking about the next steps and thinking about just some of the urgency around some of the critical issues that I've highlighted. And, you know, the more focused engagement, I think, Shannon, your questions kind of got at this, right? It's engaging with legislators, it's engaging with the governor's office, and with you all and others who are interested and engaged in these topics. On the next slide, the thing that I didn't really get to was kind of what Odo is going to be doing. And so I just wanted to say we are, as I mentioned, undertaking this evaluation of our resources and how we use them really efficiently to address priority actions where we do have the authority and the resources. And we're also waiting for, you know, we're also looking for more direction from the governor, from the legislature, who, you know, if they ask us to dig into something, we respond and we do that. And so we want to make sure that we're a resource and that we're taking, that we're responsive to those cues. We also, one thing that I didn't highlight, but you all know has been happening, we had an interagency steering group for the energy strategy. We've been in really close contact with other agencies as we've been developing the strategy, and we plan to continue that dialogue. We also plan to continue with information sharing. So as you know, we have some kind of regular publications like our biennial zero emission vehicle report or the biennial energy report. So that's one way of sharing information. But I think we're also evaluating how we can be responsive on the timelines that we need to be responsive on in providing analysis, providing evidence, providing information to help inform legislators and others. And then we do have this convening function that we serve as Odo to convene discussions. And we're really happy to continue to do that in whatever way is helpful. So again, if there's an action that starts to move forward and there are kind of differing views and it's helpful to have a forum to support that discussion, that's something we're really interested in and that we'd love to hear ideas on. And we're also going to track progress on the energy strategy. So, you know, over time, one of our jobs is going to be to see how it's going, whether there was a need for course correction, whether certain actions got taken up, whether some didn't, and why. So that kind of progress tracking is going to happen as well, and that's something that we'll be working on. So I think, let's see, there's another slide here on next steps. Sorry, that's the one we're on. Yeah, so I think I'm going to pause there just to see if there are more questions on next steps before we transition to this closing slide. And I think, Josh, we can, for the closing, we can take the slides down because the points are more there for posterity than to help us along today.
Thanks, Edith. Questions on what was just presented? I'm not seeing any. I'll be a little more patient. Yes,
Hey,
Aaron.
Ben. Yeah, thanks. I saw, thanks for this update presentation, getting us up to speed on all the changes that occurred. I saw the news release that Odo sent out this morning about the strategy. I was just wondering if y'all could talk for a few minutes about any of your other sort of comms campaign milestones. Are there other efforts to get the word out to the public across the state?
Oh, thank you. That's a great question, and I'm excited to answer it. So I don't know if you all saw, but there's a landing page now for the energy strategy that when I sent my email, it wasn't live yet, but it's now live. Maybe Josh can paste the link in the chat. So so we have, a PDF is one communication method. But it's fairly limited. It has a lot of information. It's very dense, and not everybody is going to read it all. So one thing that we've done is to create an interactive website so people can click around and bounce around to kind of look at the topic that you're interested in and just go there instead of having to dig through a table of contents and a kind of linear report. We're going to keep building up that website. And I think that's something that that you all can help us with too. If you have ideas on what more might be helpful to communicate some of the complexity of what's in the energy strategy, or to communicate on the links between the energy strategy and other related work that's happening, I think those are the kinds of things that we are thinking through right now with our communications team to build up that website to make it among other things, so that the energy strategy isn't just a PDF file that's filed away, but to make it kind of an ongoing live part of our website, linking up with the live things that are happening. So I see, Josh, thanks. You just linked to that web page. I don't know if anybody wants to add to that from our team. That's what comes to mind most immediately to answer Aaron's question. Am I forgetting anything? I might add, actually, I will add something, which is that I think that some of the work that goes into the things that Odo would do to implement the strategy, some of it is informational. And I know that there were some comments saying, we don't need information, we need action, and we need both, right? It's a really complicated time with a lot of shifting sands. And so we are looking at how the energy strategy links up with our broader analytical work and how we can make that analytical work align with the energy strategy and be responsive to sort of the needs that, and this is kind of something that we always do. But I think because we have the energy strategy now, there's more of an anchor to help inform our broader kind of policy research and engagement work. So you might see us coming out with, articles or, other information that carries forward some of the ideas or elaborates on them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you, Edith.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. I'm being a little patient here. Other comments, questions? Okay. Well, maybe in the time we have left, we can just create some space for closing and reflection. I don't know, Edith, if you wanted to kind of kick us off with helping to kind of wrap this process and start that, and then I'll open it up to the room.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Well, I just want to really sincerely thank everybody for the time that you committed to this process. Many of you were involved not just in the advisory group, which in and of itself was a lift with a lot of long meetings, but you also supported talking to your organizations, engaging in working groups, sending in written comments. And I just really appreciate that there are always competing interests and competing time pressures, and that you made the time to really engage and share your thoughts and your critical thinking in this process. So just really appreciate everybody here and getting to know you a little bit better. I'm sorry we didn't get to meet more in person, but that's kind of the reality of today. But I hope to meet you all in different configurations in person moving forward, and just really want to express really huge gratitude. This was a big project and is ongoing work, and I just want to thank you all from myself and from the whole team. I think we all share the sentiment.
Thanks, Edith. I'd love to just open it up if folks want to offer any reflection. I know for folks that were at our last meeting, we had some space for that, but you've kind of seen regardless of whether you've had the time to sit with it and digest it, you've seen the kind of final product and result of all the work and dedication and expertise that's been put into this. So I'll just create any space that folks want to take to reflect back on process or to help close us out.
I see
Might
Shannon.
Yep, jump in, please.
I'm back again. Yeah, I wanted to commend everyone that has put this together. Very challenging process, and it's a daunting task. And nothing will underscore the value of the work that you have led and we have collectively informed at a time that the region is waking up to the reality of our resource inadequacy. Just the Regional Energy Symposium that was just held here, a month and a half ago, we learned that our gas utility and electric utilities, when they get together and compare notes and do some benchtop analyses, there are some scenarios that are very likely to occur that they don't really have a way out of. So we've got to figure out how to move quickly. And I think that you've done a really good job of preparing that framework. And it's very important that we get your message out. So thank you.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thanks, Shannon. And I'll just say that the energy strategy is better because of this group. And I hope that you all see it. It doesn't mean that you agree with everything in it, but I hope that you see that we have been listening. We've been working really hard to dig into where there have been comments, where there have been critical comments. And I really think that this group has played a critical part in that. The cadence of having regular meetings. Also, I know for myself, kept me thinking about you all pretty frequently. So, preparing, debriefing after a meeting, evaluating what we'd heard, and then preparing for the next meeting with what did we do with that? How are we taking it forward? That was a really integral part of the process. So I appreciate Shannon, you kind of raising up some of these issues, which it just made me think of it because it's an example of the kinds of things that we were hearing when we were meeting with you, and that we were working really hard to analyze and evaluate and think through.
Thanks, Edith. Well, I'm going to interpret silence as no additional reflection. So I'm just going to feel the energy and appreciation around the room, and not try to belabor our time together. I'll say it's been an honor and a privilege to be in the space, and this overlay of policy and production and distribution and resilience and reliability, and it's been kind of a master class for me and someone who didn't come in with a lot of background in energy. And I feel like now I have at least a little background in energy, and certainly feel like I live in with some stronger relationships with folks that are, engaged in this work meaningfully every day. So, like I said, it's a privilege, and recognize that this is a strategy, right? And it doesn't get into the proof will be in the execution and implementation of making this real. And I know that's a lot of hard work that every single one of you will be a part of, both in this bigger global perspective in terms of our state and then the work that you do each and every day. So it's always bittersweet for me to spend all this time kind of getting to know the content and working with the client relationships and being in the space with you all. It's always sad for me to have last meetings. I want these things to go forever, which I know is obnoxious, but the relationships matter, and I've appreciated all the chance I've got to spend with you. So I'll pause for one last moment if there's any other questions. Otherwise, I'm going to close this out and wish everyone well and onward and upward.
Hey, Ben, I have a joke.
Yes.
I'm gonna close on my end with a joke, which is, we have 42 actions in the energy strategy. And while the energy strategy is not the answer to everything, for anyone who's read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the answer to the universe and everything is 42. So somewhere in there is the answer.
Oh, wow.
So I'm using it.
Well, you got some laughs and some claps, and I think there's no better way to end a process than with that kind of appreciation and with some humor and some vision for the world. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Appreciate all the energy and effort that's gone into this. Appreciate you. Have a wonderful day. Take care.
Take care, everybody. Goodbye.